The man with no eyes keeps staring at me. The man with no eyes keeps staring at me. He appears every night at exactly 10:16. I don't know what it is about that time, but it is the exact minute that he wishes to be seen. I believe that he is present and watching every minute of every day, but something about that exact minute allows me to see him. He watches me, with the two black holes that should contain his eyes. He only appears for 1 minute, then, as quickly as he appears, he is gone again. The two holes that reside on his otherwise normal face are the darkest and deepest black, like looking down a deep tunnel you aren't sure where it leads to. The rest of his face is normal. He looks like a normal man, in his mid-40s. He wears an old black suit, the same color as the holes on his face. I first saw the eyeless man a few months ago. I was in the shower, fairly late at night, after a long day at work. I had used shampoo in my hair, massaged it into my head and just started to rinse it out. I closed my eyes and placed my head under the hot stream of water, but when I came out from underneath the shower head, I reopened my eyes and saw him standing there. On the other side of the bathroom. He was motionless, but his body was facing directly towards me. The deep black holes in his face were the first thing I noticed. I knew that, despite his lack of eyes, he was staring directly at me. Watching me. I stayed put in the shower, staring back at the man, trying my best to not gain too much of his attention. I thought that it was an intruder, and so I was trying to think of my next course of action. I needed to get out of the shower, get to phone and call the police. The plan formulated in my mind, and just as I was about to execute it, he vanished. Directly in front of me, the man with no eyes disappeared. I knew then that this was no ordinary man, this was something else. I turned off the running water and reached out to grab my towel. After the first incident, I tried my best to convince myself that it was just a figment of my imagination and not actually real. I would have convinced myself of that, if it weren't for one thing. The fact that he showed up again the following night. I was just climbing into bed when he appeared the next day. He appeared at the foot of my bed. The two black holes stared directly into my own eyes. His facial features were blank, but, just from the way he was staring, I could tell he wanted something. He was longing for something. Something I had that he didn't. He disappeared again, right in front of me, and once he had departed, I actually checked the clock. 10:16 it read. At this stage I wasn't aware that it was the exact same time, down to the minute, as the previous night, but I knew it was a similar time. Each night after that, the man with no eyes would manifest himself in front of me. Without fail, he would appear in front of me and just stare towards me. He never moved. Never spoke. He just looked. Directly into my own eyes. I didn't know what to do, but one thing I did know, was that he didn't seem to be a danger to me. Sure, he was scary, but my fear had slowly subsided and I almost awaited his arrival each night. I welcomed him. In the lead up to 10:16, I looked at the clock in anticipation of his inevitable visit. I even tried talking to him, but never was given a response in return. I grew used to him paying me a visit and gracing me with his presence. I even grew to feel his presence, even when I could not see him. I often would feel his stare throughout the day. I would look around, expecting to see him, but he wasn't visible. I knew he was there, watching me, but he never allowed himself to be seen. Only at 10:16, was I allowed to see him myself. Only then could I see his longing stare, looking straight into my eyes. I had convinced myself that he was no danger to me, just an innocent guest, but that changed after the events of last night. The clock struck 10:15. I had been checking the clock for the past half an hour, waiting for him, and now it was almost time. Only a minute to go. I was sitting in my armchair in the living room, a small glass of wine in my hand. I was looking out across the room, waiting for him to manifest himself into the center of it. I checked the clock one last time and witnessed it change the number 15 to the number 16. It was time. And just like that, right on time, the man with no eyes appeared before me. He stood in the center of the room, his body facing towards mine, his eye holes were locked onto my eyes. I tried to greet him with a friendly hello, but he didn't respond. He did do something, however, that he hadn't ever done before. He took a step towards me. Just a small one, but it was definitely a step. I flinched as I saw him move. I wasn't sure how to react. Should I be worried? Or should I be pleased that he wanted to interact with me? He then took another. At this point, I did feel afraid. The black holes in his face were still looking straight into my own eyes. He took another step forward and then another. With each step he took, the holes in his head became clearer and clearer. They were the darkest color I had seen and seemed to burrow deeper than his head, like looking off into space or staring down into a canyon. The abyss almost seemed inviting though, and I couldn't stop myself from staring into them. He was coming closer and closer, and each step he took, I felt more enticed by his eyes. The hole seemed to stretch on for miles, much further than I was capable of seeing. The black space showed no sign of color or of any light, only complete darkness that spread out endlessly. The man was now almost next to face, and all I could now see was the black. His eyes were almost up against mine, and so I had no option but to stare directly into the holes in his head. Something began to appear in the black abyss. It was faint at first, but then began to materialize more and more. It was myself, floating in the black space. Only I looked different. I too only had holes where my eyes should be. My eyes were missing. I also looked strangely familiar. I looked almost identical to the man with no eyes. I had never noticed before, but we bared an uncanny resemblance to one another. In fact, in that moment, I thought that I was him. Suddenly the vision disappeared and light returned to my eyes. I looked out across the room at what I was seeing. I saw myself sat in the armchair. My eyes seemed to have returned. The only problem was that I was standing on the other side of the room and no longer in my body. I looked down at my body and saw that I was wearing a dark black suit. I spent most of the day now, staring at myself, just watching. I know that my eyes aren't there, but my vision is still clear. I can still move around and do as I please, but I don't think anyone can see me, only for a small amount of time each day. I can't help but stare at myself. I watch each move intently. I know that the person that used to be me can feel me watching. They await my arrival each night, but I don't make a move. Not yet anyway. I know I wish to switch back soon, but I need to buy my time. For now, I will continue to watch, longing to have my eyes return to me.